Nation View in Counseling and Research by Ehsan Adib Shabohang, Department of Psychology, Liberty University, Psych 700, Foundation of Doctoral Study in Psychology, Dr. Gilbert Franco. Introduction. The Levels of Explanation view was created by David Myers, a prominent psychology author. He actually authored a couple of textbooks that I have previously seen in my classes. So it was really interesting to see, for me, a familiar name come up. So in this view, as well as the other four views, arise from these fundamental questions that come up as faith-based feature counseling and researchers. Questions such as the degree to which our faith and our practice and research can overlap. The view that I found myself most closely identifying with me was Myers, as I agreed with his position to keep the field separate, or what I termed here the separation of church and state. And you can see on the right side of my presentation an image he created regarding the various levels of explanation to phenomena, including human phenomena. The elementary explanations are the building blocks of our physical world. So physics and chemistry are perfect examples. And then we see the fields which try to integrate different explanation and promote interdisciplinary studies. And what would be the social science and theology. Each of these levels of explanation differ from one another. And despite having overlapping relevance, Myers believes we need to treat each field as distinct, particularly when it comes to theology and psychology, as psychology is the field which Myers studies. So it's not much that biochemistry is an issue as it is the theology should be kept separate from the other fields. One of the main strengths of the levels of explanation view is that it allows for a greater tolerance and humility, in my view. That includes collaboration between psychologists, regardless of their faith. Some of other explanation to me seem to place psychologists of faith on a higher level or as having a different kind of advanced understanding. And to me, that felt a little condescending of other religions and of people who simply do not subscribe to religious belief and practices. While I completely agree that faith adds a different type of understanding and, in my view, a fuller type of understanding of psychology. However, faith is individual to the person, and in my view, it would be intolerant to assume that everyone else will agree with this view. And of course, my statement that faith is about a person's relationship with God cannot be separated from this bias, because that is my view. And I know many other people who hold the same aspect of religion is great esteem. So I recognize that my understanding is more individualistic, which I feel is more compatible with the levels of explanation view. Psychology can work together in research and practice, no matter the difference in faith. So it's important for us to understand this. While we're thinking about balance, this is also another thing that we should focus on. It is also my view that the levels of explanation view is balanced, in that it honestly acknowledges the strengths and limitation of each field, and Myers also does not exclude theology from this analysis. Rather, he states that just as science can be misinterpreted and errors can be made, this can also take place in theology as well. While the Bible is perfect as a work, it is still subject to interpretation of humans, and this can be a source of misconception and error. And this kind of acknowledgement does not seem like a drawback necessarily, because to me, it allows for a more dynamic relationship between each person and God. If everything in the Bible was laid out in such a way where no one would ever disagree on the fundamental message, there would be no Bible studies, no spirited back and forth discussion or debates. And this is not only limited to Bible, it goes on and on and on with every type of religion. So this is also a key. The levels of explanation view honestly acknowledges the strengths and limitation in each field. And they're all subjected to misinterpretation. And that's something that we should take in consideration. Another fact on the levels of explanation view is that it promotes critical thinking and reflection. First, because it allows each Christian psychologist the opportunity to interpret what they feel are areas of compatibility or areas of tension between psychology and Christianity. Some Christians feel a great deal of tension and cognitive dissonance, while others feel the work are fundamentally compatible. And there are many degrees in this regard. So it is entirely possible for some people to have views which shift over time and as they reflect more on the subject. Either way, it promotes an individual's journey and the formation of their own relationship between themselves, God, and psychology. The levels of explanation view allows for each field or each levels of explanation to be pure and free from theological influences. And since I believe it is up to each Christian psychologist to form their own connection between science and theology, this view allows for each field, including the field of psychology, to remain pure. You need not look further than your book itself to support this. As the 5 Christian psychologists have a different understanding of the integration between faith and psychology. Keeping the fields separated allows those 5 psychologists to articulate their own views without being unduly influenced by the views of others. Keeping the fields separate also allows for Christian psychologists to always act in the best interest of psychology when they are, of course, practicing psychology. There is no need to choose an alliance to one or the other or feel pressure to integrate both. And there is also then no hidden agenda in the work of Christian psychologists. This is not only keeps the fields of psychology pure, but it allows for other psychologists to trust the work of Christian psychologists, so that a Christian psychologist's finding can help everyone rather than they are Christians themselves or not. So it doesn't matter. And it's supposed to be pure to help everybody. That's the goal that we must follow. Myers himself outlined 7 ways that faith and psychology can be brought together, and I thought sharing them would be a great way to reinforce the point that the levels of explanation view can certainly integrate Christianity and psychology. So as long as the fields themselves are kept separated, the first is that faith motivates science. Faith allows for a sense of awe and wonder at the world and at God's many gifts to us. And this can be powerful motivator for Christian psychologists to study science. The second is that faith mandates skeptical security and scrutiny. So it allows us to test specifically New Age claims such as astrology against the rigorous of empirical science. The third strategy is to express faith rooted values. Christian psychologists, just like all other psychologists, cannot help but let their values inform their work, and we can use this as a way to promote Christian values in the natural way without any subversion or trickery. It allows our voices to be heard. We can also give psychology to church. So we can use psychology to help us write effective sermons that really reach into people's heart and mind. Faith. Fifth, there are, of course, differences in the way that psychology describes human nature and the religious understanding of human nature. So, as Christian psychologists, we can recognize those differences and explore them in our work. We can also examine the different determinants of religion experience, or use psychology to better understand what motivates people to embrace religion or spirituality as opposed to religion or anything in between. And finally, we can study the effect that the religion has on people who believe. Does it affect our attitude or emotion or behavior? How? This is the seventh way to relate faith and psychology. We need to understand that faith motivates science. Faith mandates skeptical scrutiny, expressing faith rooted value, giving psychology to church, relating psychological and religion description of human nature, and studying determinants of religion experience, studying religion's effects. This is an example of what I described earlier, or how we can use psychology to study happiness as it relates to religion's attendance. We can see from the data that individuals who attend religious service several times per week are the happiest. Several times a week, weekly, nearly weekly, monthly, several times per year, never. And the figure two, the data from 42,000, more than 42,000 participants in the general social services in the National Opinion Research Center that was conducted between 1972 to 2008. In conclusion, to recap, I want to emphasize what drew me into this level of explanation view as a featured counselor of faith. Specifically, this view promotes tolerance and humanity. It promotes balance between people. Let's go back to the tolerance and humanity. Humility. That's an important factor that gets overlooked. The balance. We need to have balance in everything that we do, especially as psychologists. As we grow into our field, everything has a balance. There is a fine line that divides everything, and knowing when are we up, when are we low, and when are we at the right place where we need to be. If there is one thing that I took away from my years of studying, being in the military, serving the country, working day to day jobs, helping myself, pushing myself to reach where I am today, is that the power of balance, critical thinking, and reflection. We can't think critically if we don't have balance, if we don't have tolerance. These are all interrelated. And the purity of psychological field, it needs to be pure. And finally, and leads itself well to psychological study of fate. It's really easy to overlook what is actually important, what actually it needs to happen. However, as we discussed, it's important for us to understand the introduction part that I explained. The integrative levels of explanation, the elements of explanation, and you can see right here theology, philosophy, sociology, psychology, biology, chemistry, physics. We call it separation of state, separation of church and state. But everything is interrelated as long as we keep the balance. And once again, the data shows how it can help people. Once more, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to allow me to present my presentation. The references that I have chosen for this presentation are listed below. Thank you for your time. It was my pleasure to participate in this assignment, and I wish you guys a happy day. And thank you once more for the Liberty University Department of Psychology, Psych 700 Foundation of Doctoral Study in Psychology, especially Dr. Gilbert Franco, for allowing me to participate in his class and create this presentation. Thank you very much. And as always, have a wonderful day.